You know, one of the best learning aspects you can have are those times when you don't even realize you're learning something. One of those times happened to me when I was a young programmer and I was working on a contract with some great people. I was called over to the main offices at one stage there, and I wandered in, and there was the general manager waiting for me. Now, this isn't so much unusual because I'm often over there talking to the general manager, but it was unusual that he met me at the door. And he said, as soon as I came in, he said, "Come with me, I've got a new project for you." And I thought, cool. I don't have to go out searching for a new project. This contract was about to come to an end, and off on the road to finding a new one. If there's a new project here, I'll take it. It's a great place to work. So as we were walking down, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said to me, "Have you ever considered becoming a project manager?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Great, now's your chance." So and we walked further down. I thought, oh, something's happening here. And as we walked down the hallway, I could hear this commotion coming from the end of the hallway. And he explained that this project, he'd had a couple of other project managers who could not gain consensus out of all their middle managers, and he wanted me to give this a go. He felt I was the right person. So I didn't. I was ready to turn around and walk with the opposite direction, but we got to the end, the door opened, and the sight that beheld me was amazing. Everybody was arguing. They were all telling everybody how wrong everybody was. There was one guy even leaning over the table, pointed to somebody else, telling him he's absolutely wrong. And then as the door opened and the general manager and myself walked in, that scene just froze in time as they stopped and looked. And the general manager says to me, "I've asked these people to stay here and come to a consensus, and they're not allowed out of this room until they do. I'm sure you can make that happen." He patted me on the shoulder and then put his hand physically behind me and gently pushed me forward into that room. And he said, "I'll expect a consensus by 6 o'clock. And he closed the door behind me and walked away. And I'm sitting here staring at everybody, and about 1.5 seconds later, they just carried on arguing. And I'm saying, "Hi?" They just carried on arguing. It was just amazing. So I tried to stop the arguing. I tried to find out what this is all about. I tried to talk to some people. They weren't listening to me. I had absolutely no power in that room whatsoever. So I had already decided, well, tomorrow I might be searching for a new contract. We'll see what happens. And I was sitting there waiting for this, wondering what to do, listening to everybody fighting. And I started fiddling. And one of the things I started fiddling with was down one end they had a big whiteboard and a whiteboard marker. And every now and again I would hear a word come out in the argument. So I wrote that down as a bullet point. And somebody else said a sentence, so I wrote a summary of that sentence down as a bullet point. And after I've got about a dozen of those, this is after about half an hour of listening to this arguing going on, suddenly one of them stood up and said, actually looked at my bullet point. She was contemplating what I was doing down there. And she eventually said, "Fine," she says, "I like that." I said, "I like what you've done there, Steve. I want you to swap the priority from the second bullet point to the third bullet point. So I want that third bullet point as a higher priority than the second." And the room stopped arguing. The room stopped completely talking. Silence. And everybody looked around to see these bullet points. Nobody else had seen them. And there was a pause for a moment. Somebody else came out and said, yeah, I can cope with that, but I'd want this other one down the bottom there to be a bit higher as well, and I'd also want this feature in this project. So I wrote that new bullet point down and I swapped a few things around. And then the room erupted into all of this idea of what was priority, what was not. It was no longer an argument though. It was a discussion. And it was a lot of fun, and I was frantically at the whiteboard going on and off, and occasionally somebody would jump up and grab the pen and write something else down, and there's arrows and stuff going on. This project turned out to be one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on. It was my first foray into being a project manager. I had no idea what I was doing. When I walked into that room, I was well out of my depth, and the only thing that stopped me running from the building was the fact the door was closed, and I couldn't find a decent excuse. But it turned out to be good. Now, I didn't know what I was doing with the bullet points. I had no idea until years later when I was studying how to facilitate team meetings. And in that it talked about one thing that I recognized in what I had done, and it suddenly fell into place. And that was that I had turned a negative situation into a positive situation. So instead of people arguing about what wasn't right, they were now discussing about what was right. Turning that negativity into positivity that's how this project came to be. By the end of that day, we not only had consensus, but the project had actually kicked off. It was a lot of fun. Now, I hope you get something from that, and I'll see you later.